Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the All Systems Go podcast, where we invite startup founders and digital marketers alike to discuss strategies and software used to build automated marketing and sales systems that scale. I'm your host, Chris L. Davis, the founder of Automation Bridge. And today, our guest is Ben Bressington, and he's a speaker, and author of multiple books, with the latest book, People Ignorant, Unlocking Success, Confidence, and Influence. Ben has a law and criminal degree from Australia and spent 10 years helping Fortune 100 companies apply gamification principles to their sales and communication process. Uh, if that didn't just kind of pique your interest, everybody, somebody gamifying with a criminal and law background, just that's just a precursor of what you have in store today. And now he spends his time helping people improve their sales conversions or conversations, specifically helping people close deals faster and discover hidden opportunities in our daily communication. We're going to talk about behavior intelligence and how you can use it to close more deals and close faster. Ben's here to do it. Ben, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Man, I am in the presence of a rock star. Like I feel like nervous, like meeting the queen or something. Like I'm like, oh my god, this is Chris. Like, damn.
I'm a mere mortal, man, mere mortal, and I am. So this is the good thing about the podcast is I get to interview people with a respect for me, and then I mutually get to give that respect back because the platform that you've built and are continuing to expand is so unique like none other, and I can't wait to talk about it. But first and foremost, we know you've got the criminology and law background. We know you've been helping Fortune 100 companies with their gamification and making sure that the sales process is shortening. What were your humble beginnings like? Were you always into sales? Did you know that this is going to be the end, or did you start off somewhere else and life just instructed you down this path?
Man, I sucked at sales. I sucked at sales and communication in general. Like, it's why I love technology, and like everything I have has a technology bent to it because like I am much happier behind the screen, behind building the systems. Like for many, many years, I was the
Yeah.
guy behind the scenes,
Mm.
building the 30,000 member community, launching 300 plus apps. Like doing that was great because you know what? And why I got into internet marketing was because I'm like, I got sold the dream of you don't gotta talk to nobody. I'm like, you know what?
Yeah.
I don't like talking to nobody. So you know what? But what they don't tell you is that like that's the dream. The reality is all day long, all you do is talk to people.
Yes. Yes.
So yeah, there's been a massive evolution of that roller coaster because I started as literally an introvert who struggled to have a conversation with anybody.
Yeah.
And even today, like I have to catch myself. Like I can be the speaker on at the event. I'll walk into the room. I'm still nervous. I'm still like just watching people, like because I can analyze people and whatever. But I've got to hype myself up to go introduce myself. If someone introduces me,
Yeah.
we're talking. But man,
Yeah.
if I've got to introduce myself, I'm like, game face on, let's go. Like let's rock this. And for a
Yeah.
lot of people, it's hard. They don't know those little hacks to even do that type of stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah. Spoken like a true introvert that needed a framework to be an extrovert. Right.
Exactly. And like I love being around. What's weird is I love being around people and I feed off that. But man, I hit this point in the evening where I hit my word quota, smash. I'm like
Your
I'm done.
word
I'm just
quota.
and then I'll just literally like Irish exit as they call it, like just out. It's like where'd Ben go? Oh, he's
Yeah.
bailed. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
No, that's good. I would say I share the same sentiments. I started out, I called myself a ninja a lot of the times because you just don't see me. It's like if something's happening, things are getting done, but you just don't see the guy that's doing it. And I took pride in that. And as you mature as a business owner and entrepreneur, you start to realize that if you're going to be behind the scenes like that, then somebody has to be out front. And a lot of times that's not an easy
Hmm.
decision. And most of the times, if you have the ability to do sales, you should. And I guess that brings us to where we're at. What was the point, Ben, for you where you started to redefine what sales was? Because initially you had to have a bad relationship with it because you wanted to stay away from it. And then something shifted. What was that shift when you started to understand it better?
Yeah. So, like, when you attempting sales and you don't close a deal for 6 months, you kind of realize, like, yeah, it's not working. And
Yeah.
most people go, you know what? It's the leads. It's the leads. And I did that like everybody else. Oh, it's the leads suck, man. That
Yeah.
leads
Yeah.
suck.
Blame marketing.
And then, like, after you've done like three different completely ventures type thing, and you go, you know what? There's a commonality in all of these businesses, and it ain't the leads. Right?
Yeah.
It's a tough pill to swallow. Of like, maybe I'm doing something wrong, and like. I had the privilege of doing some work with Jordan Belfort and stuff like that, and
Mhm.
advising those guys with some of the things they did. So I had access to like those systems, and when I went through them, to me they just felt so unnatural. And I always felt like the resistance or that pressure I was putting on people was uncomfortable because it's an uncomfortable conversation. And what I wasn't aware of is that, like, I didn't know at that point in time, but the data science now shows that the resistance you create linguistically or even through body language is felt through the other person.
Mm,
And that's why they'll ghost you. Like, you get off the
mm.
call going, that was fantastic. Yeah. And then you get ghosted. And you're like, but I swear that guy was like a solid for a deal, right? Like, and
Yeah.
so it's like you really have to analyze, like, what am I saying and how am I saying it? And when, like, that creates this whole rabbit hole in itself, right? Because at the time, no one had clear answers. So it's like, how do I understand language? How do I understand body language? How do I understand myself? And
Yeah.
like that's the whole personal development rabbit hole, right?
Hmm. And I would, so let me jump on this train here. Do you feel like the more you invested in personal development and began to understand even your own wiring, the easier it was to understand sales in its proper context? Or did you have a particular mentor that made it clear? What was that for you?
Um, it's a mix of the approach,
Okay.
both. And a lot of the mentors are set in their way or their system or their framework that they operate under the
Yep.
world, right? So you have to also be aware of that. Like, because I've had some amazing mentors who were great at the content, but they delivered it like they were educating a lecture hall at a university.
Mm,
And the one question I'd always ask is like, great, how do I implement that? Not the theory behind that. How do I apply it to the conversation I'm about to have or the pitch I'm about to make?
yeah.
Or you want me to go master body language and there's 110 variables and that's going to take me at least 12 months to do. And like, what are the three I need to pay attention to on this call?
Yeah.
Because those, like, and what I realize is you don't have to go like PhD deep on a lot of this stuff. You just have to understand how to use it in the dynamics of a conversation. And when you can do that, life changes for a lot of people. And this is where a lot of people get lost on, like, they'll go and do NLP. So then they do all the NLP certifications and they'll do all these personality type assessment stuff. And I'm like, great. So can you identify a personality type? Oh, yeah, you have to give me a whole lot of variables or I got to ask them 20 questions. I'm like, no, you should be able to do it with 2 questions, or you should be able to do it just based on an assumption. What do you mean? I'm like, you're the certified trainer. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean?
That's what I mean.
Does that make sense?
Yep, yep,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely.
I'm like, so
And I go ahead, keep going, Ben, keep going.
yeah. So, and I know before we got on the call, we were talking about the sales process, and like, there's a whole lot of that people don't understand. And I understand that history continues to repeat itself, even if you're not aware of your own history. If you don't learn from the mistakes and learn the real lessons, you'll continue to make the mistakes. I made the mistakes when I was looking for business partners and all that type of stuff, right? And when you look back, like the AIDA method, like AIDA, is a lot of how a lot of sales trainers or people write their sales copy and things like that. But when do you ask the question of when was this created? Who was this created for? Most
Mm,
people never ask those type of questions, right? And when I looked it up, it was like 1846 that was created for the consumers back in 1846, right? Do you think consumer attention and interest has changed since 1846? It's
Right.
changed in the last 10 years, right?
Yep.
And I'm sure you know with your system automation stuff you have to do. How you automate a system is, I know it's similar, but it's not exactly the same as 10 years ago, is it?
Correct. Oh man, 10 years ago it was practically non-existent. Technology has just moved so fast. The processes have always been there. But watch this, Ben, let's have the same conversation 10 months from now and it will even be different. you know?
Yeah, it'll be how you consume. Like even now, we're looking at how we're consuming the content. You're creating. I know that the research shows that most buyers want somewhere upwards of 18 hours of content to be consumed before a buying decision is made. Right.
Wow.
That's what the data now shows. Right. Just for consumption. And like if you're a business owner, you have to think about, well, look, how am I using that content and how am I delivering it multidimensionally? But one of the
Yeah.
things that always fascinated me is like, I'm like, well, who's ever asked the question of how do I need to change the delivery of the content based on the personality type? And when you think of that, you're like, holy Jesus, because now in my CRM, I can automate different emails based on the 4 personality types. And I'm not even talking about 16 personalities, like, because like I'm an Australian guy, I like it simple. I like my beer
Yeah.
and my shrimp on the barbie, right? Like we keep these things simple. So the thing is 4 is more than enough for you to be more than dangerous and effective. And if you do that, like you'll start to transform your life. So automation doesn't even have to be that complicated, but it can be the results just compound, and that's what's important.
Yeah, I have to say, everybody, Ben dropped the gem just in case you didn't catch it, and it's on the floor. I need you to pick it up. The implications, and we'll revisit it right after we get into behavior, behavior intelligence, and everything. But the idea that you can follow up with a lead in your CRM based on their personality type, which changes language, which changes how you position the call to action, changes the angle that you take. And I'll say, Ben, when we first met, what really intrigued me was, I'm a personal development junkie, leadership junkie. So you can't be addicted to those two things without taking just a bunch of these assessments, right? So I've got a disc, I've got a Kobe score, I'm in just finished a program in transactional leadership, and I have a profile in there. So I know my profiles, but to your point earlier, I've also trained myself to identify the profiles in others, starting with my wife and kids,
Mhm.
because that it
Mhm.
allowed me to communicate and transact with them more effectively. When I know exactly, okay, your
Mhm.
big picture, I'm not about to sit up here and give you all the details. Here's what's happening. Or when I need details from somebody who's big picture, it's like, okay, I get the big picture, answer these questions for me, because you can't give me the information that I need just based on your personality if I don't guide you there. So I'm familiar with this in my life. I understand that I'm of the unique company. Most people maybe have taken one assessment and haven't learned how to apply it. So tell us a bit about behavior intelligence. Is it based on the 4 personalities that you're talking about and identifying those to better communicate?
I wish it was only based on 4. Where we actually used the disc profile
Okay.
and the ocean or big 5. But I found that that was too much information for a lot of people. So I had to simplify it. And I remembered back in the day that an Australian guy, Des Hunt, created what they call the bird models. And he like simplified everything to 4 birds. And the thing was, it creates a visual in which you can memorize and implement, because most people forget what the acronyms of the letters and all that type of stuff stand for, and that's the problem, right? Because if I can't recall it and apply it,
Yep. Yep.
then why did you do it in the first place, right? So the thing is we've got all the models, and the thing is we can give you whatever model you want, but the thing is for most people we simplify it so it's common denominator, so you can do something with it. And that's the big difference between what we call analytics and insights.
Okay.
Insights are actionable intelligence. Analytics is stuff you've still got to interpret and do stuff with, right? And that's a problem with a lot of these assessments is they produce analytics. And then it's like, well, how do you implement this? Oh, you need another month-long boot camp to learn how to do that and become certified in the process. Yeah, but how do I have the conversation? What's the script? What's the words? And one of the big things we noticed, and now we analyze for sales conversations, is 50 to 80% of your sales pitch is determined by how you say things and literally the
Mm,
questions you ask. And we're seeing that in a lot of the data from conversations is you're linguistically, so that the words you use are creating resistance in the person you're speaking to.
yes.
And you don't even realize it. You're following the $1,000,000 script. But
Yep.
just because I gave you the script doesn't mean you understand the fundamentals of the example is like, I didn't say I hit my wife. I didn't say I didn't hit my wife. Like you can go all the way through, right? You move the tonality of the line
Hmm.
uh, to the whole point of I didn't say I hit my wife. Like that every time you change the tone placement on
Yep.
that, you change the interpretation. Um, and I know when we first met, we showed you, hey, we can analyze somebody's web page, show them the personality type for the content on the web page, and actually then show them the personality of the person doing the sale. And is there a mismatch? Because you know what? You hired a copywriter, you used a template, you filled in some blanks,
Yep.
and you don't realize that you're like, why am I attracting these knuckleheads?
Yes.
Right?
I have to throw myself in this bucket because I started selling programs and courses online like anybody else. Hey, there's technology that can do it. Put it in, record a video, sell it for hundreds, thousands, whatever the case may be, right? And it got to the point where, as I'm growing in my personal development and just understanding more about myself and other personalities, and I had to take a step back, Ben, and I say, wait a minute, which personalities is my program best for? I had never asked the question.
Mm-hmm.
Never asked the question. So I go through an assessment of the people who have high retention with me and the people who had a willingness to pay, but I couldn't retain them. And it clear as day, all of them that I could not retain fell in one bucket. And they were the type of thinker that wants to do implementation to impress themselves, but they don't care beyond that initial impression and that initial high, they're on to the next project. When I'm looking for people
Yeah.
who want to do the implementation now and tomorrow and the next year and so
So
on and so forth,
you know
right?
what? You know what's interesting about that though is that you can actually identify the opportunity with that. So we would call that
Yes.
person the peacock, right? We call it Vegas, the peacock, because it's just like Vegas. It's all glitz and
Mhm.
glamour, status. They want to be famous, right? So you know what? I would go, you know what? There's a massive opportunity because you can have the peacock version of our system, which actually teaches you the theory so you understand it and you'll be famous because you now know something. But then we give you the assistant team to implement it because we
Yes.
know you hate implementation.
Yep.
So
Yep.
then, like, you can actually start to segment your business model
Yes,
based on
Ben.
your persona types. And one of the biggest problems people make with personas, they go, oh yeah, it's a mother of 3 kids and who's got a dog who has a Subaru and a minivan and like got lifestyle goals of this. She's wearing Lululemon and blah blah blah, right? And I'm like, yeah, but that's great and all, but if I know their personality type, I can literally change my words so I resonate with them.
Yep.
And it brings in the demographics data, which you can actually bring in smarter demographics rather than because you're talking to somebody's core motivations. And so if people didn't capture it, we can literally take an email address or a LinkedIn profile and convert that into a full personality assessment without you doing any assessments.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we take it one step further, which we can actually analyze your emails, your call recordings, your voicemails, your text messages, and literally you, provide you with over 100 different insights by like, do you have influence over the person you're talking to? If you're on a call with somebody, it's like, do you have authority? And if you don't have authority and influence, well, when you go to close a deal, I can promise you, you're going to go, you know what? Can you just email me that over, or I'll get a look at it next week? And you know what they're going to do? They're going to ghost you, right? So the thing is we can
Yep.
actually see if there's miscommunication subtleties that you missed. And like the simplest things is what we call the happiness sandwich. And the happiness sandwich is simple. From a data science perspective and a human behavioral perspective, you only remember how something starts and how something ends. So this is the biggest writer down you're going to hear today. Whenever you do something with you're automating something, make sure people have fun at the end of it, or it's enjoyable, or it's memorable. Like make someone smile, right? So you got to make them smile at the start, got to make them smile at the end. And most people don't
Mm.
realize is when they do something, you may create a negative emotion, or you may dive into some pain, and you leave them sitting in that resentment and pain with no hope of the future. So you go, okay, the call is great. I really built pain. I got them. They're going to move forward. And they're stuck in that negative emotion, which causes them to start to look for other options, or get stuck, or just not want to communicate with you because you've created this negative memory. So
Wow.
we can actually tell you in 15 seconds, literally, if the emails you're sending are causing people to lose interest. Like that's the type of power of what's going on. So now you can use metrics to improve yourself like never before.
Yeah, and it's I hope it's all coming together for our listeners, because this is how you close sales. There is no magic script. There is no say this, say that. It is understanding who's in front of you and learning how to say the words in a way that resonates your solution to their pain. Now, you talked about attributes and characteristics of people are usually how we build out our avatars, right? What they wear, kids, and their income and all of these things. But missing is their behavior. So you can use the attributes and characteristics to find a like avatar or image. But when they're in front of you, guess what? You've got to you've got to be able to talk to them in a way that's going to
100%.
move the transaction forward. And I believe that's the biggest piece that's missing, not just from sales strategies, just in communication. Just in communication. When I know I prepare for meetings different, I have a different energy, reservation or dissipation depending on the person who's in front of me. And I can do this maybe in a week's notice. Okay, next week, I know I'm meeting with so and so. They're going to have a million ideas. They're going to talk a million miles per hour. They're going to ask me all of these questions that they have no idea what to do with the answers. And they're going to walk away empowered. I'm going to walk away drained. I get it. But that doesn't mean I don't show up. I just show up prepared.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes you've got to get frank with yourself and get comfortable with uncomfortable conversations, because there's all
Yeah.
times when we mess up, right? And like things don't work out. So the thing is like, hey, how do I best communicate this? But how do I best communicate it in the full personality style? So I give that person the information they need, and you don't linger. Like the eagle, we call it, was that direct person. They task focused, right? They want to be the boss. They want to be in charge. All they care about is ROI, right?
Mhm.
So with that person, you go, okay, how do I just present the facts and go, here's the plan moving forward? And they're like, great, boom, because they want that. The one who wants to be your friend, wants to socialize, they want the therapy session a little bit more, and you need to be aware of that. And
Yep.
one of the biggest things we help people with literally right now is the sales conversations, what to say, how to say it, and how to evolve that and give you this feedback loop constantly so you are improving. Otherwise, you don't realize you're doing the wrong thing for 6 months, and you're like, why what you start changing other things that aren't the cause of the problem. Like one of the biggest problems we have right now, and why I created the book People Ignorant, was that we've become ignorant to how to communicate with each other.
Yeah. I
Like
agree.
we used to use words, we now use emojis. So the thing is there's generational gaps for people who are communicating in, or working with,
Yes.
that it's problematic.
Yep. I agree. I agree. And I'll say this, um, listeners, I did this. Well, I shouldn't say I did this. Ben did this to
What do you
me.
mean you did this?
Um, Ben did this to me because the first time when we met, he went to my LinkedIn and put the URL of my LinkedIn profile in his platform. Now, I don't have I wouldn't say I have the model LinkedIn profile. I don't have a whole lot of text there. I've got my work history. I've got some description. It's enough. My LinkedIn profile works really well for me. However, I've seen people with much more information on their profile. And when you showed me how it assessed me just based on my profile, no emails, no website, no anything else, just off the LinkedIn profile. Now, granted, this was a quick conversation, but I was reading on the screen and I know my scores, I know my profiles. It was at a minimum 85% accurate, just like that. And to me, the
Yeah.
opportunity at hand was clear. It was like, wait a minute, if you're closing leads in any capacity, you need to know as much as possible. And most of the time, people are limited to asking those questions to the person. Well, what if you had a platform
Yeah.
that could really help you understand this person when you go into the meeting? Here are their motivations, here are their drivers, here are the words not to use. If you want to get this
Mhm.
deal done, don't use these words. If you want them to run, use these words. What if you had that type of insight and intelligence going into these conversations? And that's where I just really saw a unique offering in your platform that I just haven't seen in the marketplace. So to that point, what gave you the courage, the arrogance, the willingness to say, you know what? These profiles have been around for ages, but nobody is doing it this way because they're missing something. Not, I think I'm crazy. I'm going to actually build out a product that takes this intelligence and provides it to somebody to help them communicate and close better.
Well, it was built for a selfish reason, because like I used it internally with my team, my people, and
Mm,
me. I'm like, how do I take that next step, right? I can't rely on other people to build it or create it. I'm like, all right, great. I could see the pieces. The problem is I could see the pieces, like, and I'm a system architect at heart, right? So I'm like, hey, if I get this data from over here, and if I get this data from over here, I can then calculate this variable here, and then the list
mm,
goes on, right? So several thousand
yeah,
variables
yeah.
later, right? I'm like, great, boom, right? And we had the prototype one, we had version two, and every time I show it to people, they're like, holy crap. I'm like, so you mean I don't have to listen to every sales call of my sales team, which I hate doing anyway? You mean like I can give my sales people, which could be one person, could be a man and his dog, right? Or a
Mhm.
lady and their dog. And the thing is like I can get real time feedback on what actually happened, not what I think what happened. You know,
Yeah.
here's a sales myth, sales faux pas I'm going to share with people. Somewhere, some trainer said, right? Get excited, make yourself super excited, like, and you'll. How many VSLs or webinars have you seen that? Oh, I'm excited to be here, super excited to be here.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
bought into that crap for the longest period of time, right?
yeah.
I'm going to tell you why it's crap. Because the thing is most people don't realize is your excitement doesn't wash off. And sometimes it actually creates more resistance rather than influence. And that's what the
Mm,
data shows. So the thing is, yes, it's okay to be passionate, but you got to be passionate in a neutral way. And sometimes you actually have to be more skeptical
mm.
and have the people justify, because you want to know the key to persuasion. Here's the key to persuasion: you need them to persuade themselves. They don't believe a word you're saying anyway.
Yep,
Trust is gone. Trust
yep,
has been destroyed. We're all this way, right?
yep.
That's just because of
I
media and
agree.
messaging. So the thing is the secret is like Chris Voss never split the difference, right? So you don't do
Yep,
that settling. So the thing is you have to continue to ask them the questions to get them to say it, them to admit it, them to realize that there's pain that they need to move through. And that's where a lot of people make mistakes. So if you get on anything, don't start being super excited, because what you can actually be doing is pushing people back in defensive mode. You know what? He's here to sell me, he's here to pitch me, and I'm going to shut down.
yep, yep. I'll say this. You just mentioned it, and we were talking about it prior. You were talking about the next version, and how it's going to incorporate all of these questions, right? Like what to ask at what point, who's asking the most questions. But what I found in life is that people are really poor question askers. Right.
Oh,
This
100%.
comes from an analytical person. I'm highly efficient, so I don't like the waste of words. I don't like the waste of questions. I like to get the most out of everything, right? And it drives me crazy. It's one of my pet peeves when someone just goes down a line of questions. They're like, "Hey, how are you doing?
Mhm.
Okay, what about how are you doing yesterday? Okay, how are you?" And it's just like, you know what? You could have asked one question and you would have got one answer that summarized all of that. And I see it even worse in transactional communication, because the person doesn't even often know how to ask the question to get the true information that they need. So you've got this
Mhm.
repository of questions. Where did they come from? What is just years of experience, and talk to us about the importance of asking the right questions.
Yeah, so it actually comes down to frameworks that are adaptable, and it's testing and working and complete evolution, and working with different partners and sales trainers who follow these models as well, right? So there's a
Hmm.
complete evolution, and there's a many people like we can actually. What's interesting is we can actually tell when you're on script versus off script, and how you gain or lose authenticity, and how that then
Mm.
impacts trust, right? So the thing is like when you get started, um, one of the best things you can actually say. So here's, is it okay if I give people a practical example? Because I'd like them
Yes,
to actually
please
maybe
do.
implement something
Please
from this
do.
call, rather than sit here and just like have another drink of whatever they're drinking right
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
So the thing is you get a lead online, right? We've all had this thing. We get their name, email, phone number, and you're gonna call them, right? You're
yep.
following up with them, right? What's the first thing you say to people, Chris? That cold lead.
Cold lead. I want to greet them, but also acknowledge whatever previous step that they just took. Right. I want to pick up
Hmm.
right where we left off.
Which is correct, right? So, but what would be what would be the first main question you ask them?
What brings you here? Right. That's probably the most common. Hey, what brings you here? I usually like to lead with information, though. I'll say, hey, I see that you said XYZ. This call is usually for
Hmm.
XYZ, ABC. So tell me a little bit about what your intentions were. Something like that.
Yeah, 100% right. So you're actually on the right track. So the thing
Hmm.
is saying who you are, where you're from, and what action and why you're calling is great. One of the best things you can actually say to people is something along the lines of, "Have you found what you're wanting, or are you still looking?" And I
Mm,
said it in a way that's actually like I'm skeptical and doubting. Like, you know what, I'm calling you, but you know what, you may have actually found, because the assumptive close is actually one of the worst things you can do in sales. And how many people have heard, oh, you got to assume the sale? Chris Voss actually says
yeah.
the opposite, remember? You
Yeah.
don't want to be assuming the sale, because you know what? I want you to sell me while I should work on you, because it's my job to be qualifying. And that's why it's a conversation. And most people have got no clue on the framework for the conversation.
Yeah.
Pitch, offer, close. No, not at all, because we can actually show the data that it doesn't map. So,
Mm,
um, and you can say something along the lines of what your statement was great, and you can adjust it if you want. You can say something along the lines of like, I was just curious, like, what was it about the PDF or the ad that attracted your attention?
yeah.
And you shut up. 4 seconds,
Yeah.
count to your head. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4. Be silent. And you know what? That's going to have them open up, um, and they're going to start to explain the reasons. And one of the other questions you can say to that is simply, well, tell me more about that.
Yep. Tell me more. Tell me more. You know what? Now that we're talking about this, and you're bringing back my Voss training, and just overall communication with people, I can't, I cannot count how many times somebody wasn't patient enough for the person that they're talking to answer and literally give them the keys that they're looking for. I have to catch myself doing it all the time, because you can be on both sides. It's not like you're just on one side for life, but in times more so when I'm engaging with my wife, I can ask a question and maybe she's not answering it the way that I think an answer to my question should go, and I'll jump
Yeah, you
in or
mean it's not a
I'll
straight line? She didn't go from A to B. She went
right.
to Z, through D, back to F, and then you know what? We've kind of gone through B, and we just touched on A, and you're like, hurry up
Yes.
and get to the point, woman. Like I just asked you, what are we having for dinner? Like,
Yeah. And I want you to tell me what I want to know, how I want to hear it. And you lose out on so much. So I've learned, just be patient. let her talk around and through things and get off on a tangent, get distracted and come back. And though it may bother me or, it may irritate me at times, that active listening, you'll find that you actually extract more from people than you could ever need. It's just people don't stay silent long enough and they don't give people the floor unadulterated without interruption or without leaving the conversation mentally and then coming back when they're done talking.
You're 100% right, because most people have been told you got to get into the pitch, build a rapport, ask these 4 questions. That's that consultative sale, which once again, late 90s, early 2000s, which things aren't the same. And people are
Yep.
aware of it. They're resistant to it now. So the thing is
Yep.
you actually like, and they actually say like rapport building, first 3 to 5 minutes of any call, 10%, whatever it is, right? Then you want to be pitching for 40%. What we're seeing is like you should be pitching for less than 10% or even 5%, because your pitch isn't complicated. And
Yeah.
if you've got me to the point where I'm like emotionally engaged and ready to act, I'm going to now take action, and therefore you shorten the deal cycle. Because this is what's happening: is a lot of the questions people ask are logical, right? Up
Yeah.
here, logic, very high level, no emotion. So therefore, longer sales cycle, harder sales cycle, the
Mm,
pressure at the end, the pressure close. You don't need any of it. If you deal with emotional pain and you scoop that out, like they're coming to you. They're going, Chris, take my money, take my money. You're like, hold on, we've got a framework and a model. Like, I just need to know like why you want to move forward with that.
yep.
And then now
Absolutely.
they're selling you on why they want you to help them.
Yep. I'm gonna put myself on the operating table here, Ben. I think it'll help people because life is a journey. Even when you arrived, you're still arriving, right? So there's never a point where you are at your best and there's no more improvement, right? I think it's called the Kaizen effect, always improving. So just a few undisclosed days ago, I was in a email conversation with a potential client, and my personality is meeting averse. I don't like meetings, and
Mm-hmm.
some meetings I will kick and you have to pull me into. And then once I'm in it, I'm like, man, that was a great meeting. I'm so glad we did it. Right? That's just me. I get it. Even meetings I schedule, it was just like, oh, I gotta meet, right? It's just something about it, right? So and I'm saying this to say I'm aware of some of the stuff we're talking about, not all of it. You're very much more mature in this area than me. But what I didn't do, Ben, is assess who I was talking to. So the deal is on the table, and I didn't realize I'm talking to another meeting averse individual. So what happens, they're like, we're trying to communicate terms through email and we've got a call schedule. And he's like, hey, look, maybe we'll postpone our call and we could just continue to work through email. Translation: if I don't have to meet, I don't want to meet because in the meeting, I may end up committing, or maybe I don't, I'm just not comfortable with going to the meeting yet. On his side. On my
Well, I
side, I'm
don't.
like,
So I don't
well,
want to be sold, right?
yes, I don't
He's
want to
saying
be
he's
so
saying I don't want to be sold. I don't want pressure to be sold. Like let me research this and like let me Google
yes,
50 reviews, right?
right.
Because like don't overwhelm me now.
Right. And here I am on another meeting I don't have to have. So both personalities literally repelled one another. And I was thinking about it the other day as I'm just walking, and I'm just like, Chris, you were the leader. You were the one that was more aware. It was my job to create the environment and slowly walk them, comfortably communicate and walk them to the end point here. And I let my personality get in, didn't assess their personality. So I say that to say, you're all, even when you learn this stuff and even when you've been practicing it for years, there's still these moments where you have these brain farts or you just get caught up and don't always apply. Nobody's 100%, but you'll get caught, but at least you'll be aware of what happened, aware why they
Well,
ghosted you.
and that's the well, but how are you becoming aware? And this is what happens: is most people don't put themselves to become aware, to have the
Mhm.
intelligence. That's why we analyze your emails that are going in and out, so you can see what's happening. You're like, ooh, that person just got frustrated. Do I want to deal with it? Am I okay losing them?
Yeah.
Like, and there's actually a stage of our framework we actually call consequence questions. And a lot of people, that
Mhm.
you could have said to the person you were talking with, going back and forth, for example, you could say, uh, have you thought about what would happen if you don't do anything about this?
Mm, yes. Great question. Great question.
So
Because you're not
write that
leading that you
down. Go
know
back
what will
15
happen,
seconds.
right? Go
Yeah, no,
ahead.
no,
Yeah.
no. And what if I know it? It's irrelevant until you say it, until you admit it. And the thing is a lot of people are selling features and benefits, which is hocus pocus,
Mm,
right? It's irrelevant. Like whoever walks up to you and go, yeah, we're the fifth best product on the marketplace, and yeah, we got sucky customer support, right? That's
yeah.
what Google reviews are for. The thing is everyone's promising the best stuff. So the thing is you want to ask them the consequence of taking inaction, and they need to trust their words. That's persuasion. Them
Yeah.
acknowledging it, them
Say
admitting
that
the
question
transition, and
again,
this is
Ben.
having them come towards you.
Yeah. Say that
All right.
question
So
again.
what if you don't do anything about this problem?
Yeah.
And your situation gets worse? Have you thought about that?
Mm,
Or I might have said the one that's, have you thought about what would happen if you don't do anything?
yeah.
And the thing is you need to learn how to say them in a way that it's natural for you. So it's all about repeating them and
Yeah. Yeah.
understanding the tonality. Because I can say this, I'm like, Chris, have you thought about what would happen if you don't scale your business and solve the challenges you got with your sales team right now?
Mm, mm. And then silence. Silence. Hmm.
Have you thought about that?
Yeah.
What's he doing? He's thinking about it. He's doing it. I can't answer that on the podcast, man. Like, yeah. But we all go through this, and this is the thing: is like now he's emotionally coming towards, and he doesn't even realize it. I'm not pressure selling anything. There's nothing to pressure sell. I don't even have an expectation of a sale, because if you remove that, they can actually feel you not being salesy. And if you're not
Yeah.
being salesy, you're being a trusted authority.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Ben, I can go on for days with this. It feels like I'm not saying you should, not saying that you haven't, but it feels like there's a list of questions that somebody could go to your website and get them started and start to practice, maybe 10 or so questions that they can start to ask in their sales, their communication journey of shortening their sales cycle to wet their whistle, because I found that those are, whether they're cards or, whatever the case is, I find that when people are nervous and this is a lot, but I want to do it right, sometimes that visual cue, does help. So whether you have that or not, what's the best place for people to go to connect with you and find out more about behavioral intelligence and applying it to sales, as we've been talking about?
Yeah, behaviorsales.com. You can spell it the English way or the American way. Convict English or TV English, either way it works. But behaviorsales.com. And if you actually email help@behaviorsales.com and mention this podcast, I'll make sure that the team will provide you with some video training on these type of questionings and even understanding the personality basics.
Great,
So that's a huge
great.
thing. I can promise you that resource alone, if you just take one thing and implement it, it can transform any call you're having and even your understanding of who you are and what personalities are. So that's a great resource to help you take the next step.
Great. Outstanding. We'll have that email posted as well as the link to behaviorsales.com in the show notes. I if you haven't decided at the time of recording this, we're at the top of the year. If you haven't decided that every year as an entrepreneur and business owner that you need to invest in professional growth and development, I think now is the perfect time to start to say, what this year am I going to do to grow professionally? Starting with communication and sales, I just don't feel like anybody could ever go wrong. We're always selling, Ben. It may not be a product. We may be selling
Yeah.
ourselves. We may be selling our desire. We may be selling what our future to someone that we want to be involved with it. We're always doing it.
You, c- you could be
So
you could be communicating where you want to go for dinner. It's
yes,
this. You'll be
yes.
amazed how like struggling with that, understanding that like it's not like, hey, it's not always sales. It's like,
Hmm.
how do I have a conversation with loved ones? How
Yeah.
do I tell someone I don't want tacos tonight? I
Yep.
want lasagna. Like,
Yep.
it could be that as simple as that.
Absolutely. And I find most people struggle with those conversations because they're missing language. So anytime you have a resource like yours that gives you language to say what you really want to say what you need to get what you want out of life and business, do
Mhm.
so. So can't thank you enough, Ben, for jumping on the podcast, man. Really appreciate it. I will make sure that again, all of our show notes and links are accessible to you. Any parting words for our listeners?
Yeah, we gave you some huge gold nuggets. The thing is you may suck when you try this with someone, right? And you
Yeah.
may get it wrong.
Yeah.
We all do. But the thing is that shows your commitment to action and mastery. And one of the things I want people to be aware of is that um, uh, confidence actually comes from the state of action. Whenever you think about that, confidence is actually created after you've taken some action or done something.
Mm,
So you will get more confident with this when you've said it 3 times. You'll get
yep.
more confidence with this when you've felt the impact of it, or you know where you fumbled it. And look, forget tonality in the first few versions. Just do it. Start to come natural with it, and I can promise you, you'll be like, "Oh, whoa, holy crap, whoa!" Like,
Yeah.
it's fine.
Got it, man. That was great. Great, great last words. I will not add to them. Thank you for coming on to the podcast, man.
Thanks, man.